Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the presentation of the Alice and Clifford Spendlove Prize in Social Justice, Diplomacy, and Tolerance. I am Nigel Hatton, an Associate Professor of Literature and Philosophy at the University of California, Merced, and I have the honor of serving as the host of ceremonies for today's event. I would like to take a moment now to introduce a few special guests who have joined us for this occasion. We're delighted to have members of the Spendlove family in the audience today. Sherry Spendlove and her husband, Fernando Guerrero, and also the honor of having Micah Spendlove and Tiffany Spendlove. Also joining us today, UC Merced Chancellor Munoz's wife, Dr. Zenaida Aguirre Munoz, Professor in Cognitive Science at University of California, Merced. I would also like to recognize the elected officials and district representatives in the audience, including Fred Reese, an original board member of the trustees of an original board of trustees member for UC Merced. And also we have Darren McDaniel of the Merced County Supervisors. Thank you all for joining us today. It is now my pleasure to introduce Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Greg Camfield. Greg has been at UC Merced since 2007, when he arrived as a professor of literature and preeminent scholar of Mark Twain. He tells me that one of his favorite tasks in his early years here was to serve as a faculty representative on the Spendlove Prize Selection Committee before handing it off to me, a privilege and honor I do not take lightly. And he is very pleased to be able to once again participate in this ceremony, which symbolizes not only our celebration of a particular prize recipient, but also the university's commitment to social justice, diplomacy, and tolerance. Please, Greg.
Thank you, Nigel. And I do want to say one thing about it, why I was so pleased to hand over that faculty role to Dr. Hatton here. He studies the discourse of civil rights, and he looks at everything from policies and legal briefs to creative writing, including things like memoirs and autobiography. So he is truly the expert here, and I'm delighted to be able to work with him on this project. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you on this significant occasion. Established in 2005, the Alice and Clifford Spendlove Prize in Social Justice, Diplomacy, and Tolerance is made possible by a generous gift from Merced native Sherry Spendlove in honor of her parents, lifelong educators Alice and Clifford. UC Merced is deeply appreciative of Sherry's generosity. The Spendlove Prize recognizes a renowned scholar, author, artist, or citizen who exemplifies in their work the promotion of social justice, diplomacy, and tolerance in the diverse local and global society. Each year, we honor an individual who serves as a role model and inspiration for our local community, our students, our faculty, and the community surrounding us. And certainly this year's recipient has done so, bringing change not only to UC Merced and our community, but much more importantly to the world as well. I would like to recognize the Spendlove Prize Selection Committee members whose work made today's event possible. Sherry Spendlove, the Dean of the School of Social Sciences, Humanities, and Arts, Jeff Gilger, Charlie Bennett, Lee Anderson, our host, Professor Nigel Hatton, and Jamie Moore. It's now my honor to introduce the founder of the Alice and Clifford Spendlove Prize in Social Justice, Diplomacy, and Tolerance. Sherry Spendlove has demonstrated visionary support of this campus since its inception. She is one of UC Merced's original members of the Foundation Board of Trustees, Legacy Circle, and Chancellor's Associates. Each year, Sherry strives to bring her parents' dreams to life through the Spendlove Prize. Please welcome Sherry Spendlove.
Thank you very much, Executive Vice Chancellor Camfield. We're so lucky to have you preside over today's events. You've been so influential in helping to shape the Spendlove Prize through your committee membership, your stepping in on occasion as chair of the Spendlove Prize, and in your understanding of the importance of the tenets of this prize to the university. Others who have been influential to the Spendlove Prize, first and foremost, are the two writers of the tenets of the prize, Kenji Hakuta, who is the first chair of the Spendlove Prize, and Jen Mendenhall, who is the first person at UC Merced that I contacted about wanting to do this endowment in my parents' name. Jan and Kenji interviewed my parents for hours, discovering who they were, what mattered most to them. And in fact, they became so close to my parents that when both my parents died in 2015, I asked Jan and Kenji to do the eulogy at their funeral. Hans Bjornsson, who comes either from France or his native Sweden, we're not sure today, but he was the second chair of the Spendlove Prize, and he brought us President Carter and Faye Crosby, who is on Zoom today from the Starbucks in Kingman, Arizona. So here's hoping that that works. The present chair is Dean Jeff Gilger, who presided over Rigoberta Menchu's visit to our campus. And a big thank you to Arturo and Jill for that contact. And also last year's Zoom with Alicia Garza, who's co-founder of Black Lives Matter. This Zoom happened only an hour or so after the jury found Derek Chauvin guilty in the killing of George Floyd. So it was an incredibly timely and momentous Spendlove Prize event last April. Former committee members on the Zoom call are Kim McMillan, Gail Yamada, Lindsay Lupon, and original Spendlove Prize members Martha Acevedo and Marcia Bond. I could also name a few Spendlove Prize followers who have never missed a Spendlove Prize event since 2005. This list would not be complete without mentioning especially Christine Howe, who has brought together many, many Spendlove Prize events, Kim Garner, Chris Luna, Juan Flores, Tricia Koenig, and a myriad of others. Thank you to you all. My parents, these supporters, and you, the participants today, are all people who work hard with integrity and goodwill towards all, people who have built and continue to build our community and our country. This prize truly represents and belongs to us all, every student, every staff member, every community member, every global citizen who cherishes the tenets of the prize. Founding Chancellor Carol Tomlinson Kesey and I awarded the first Spendlove Prize at the opening ceremony of UC Merced on September 5th, 2005, in front of a crowd of 4,000 people, which comprised the new students, their families, community members, and local and state dignitaries. The Chancellor's intention was to set the tone for the first UC campus in the 21st century that reflected the tenets of the prize: social justice, diplomacy, and tolerance, and to entwine them in the very fabric of UC Merced. The first prize was given to Merced's son, Charles Ogletree, a Harvard law professor known for his work in social justice, ethics, mentoring of students, and giving back to the community. The Chancellor also chose Charles Ogletree to give the keynote speak at this momentous opening. I am so pleased to honor Nadia Murad as our 14th recipient. I've been following her story and her humanitarian work for a number of years. I am passionate about getting to the roots of genocide as a means to prevent it in the future, and about speaking out against the use of women and children as not only weapons of war, but as the booty or treasure stealing of war. This is unacceptable and nefarious. In other words, wicked and criminal under any common ethical or moral standards. We welcome with open arms Nadia Murad and her humanitarian agenda. Nigel will be introducing Nadia, and as you heard, he's a long-standing, highly esteemed member of the Spendlove Prize Committee. He's Associate Professor of Literature, who is also affiliated with the Critical Race and Ethnic Studies program at UC Merced. His knowledge, passion, and expertise in social justice are far-reaching. Nigel?
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you. It is now my extreme honor to introduce the 14th recipient of the Alice and Clifford Spendlove Prize, Nadia Murad. Human rights activist and recipient of the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize, Nadia Murad is a leading advocate for survivors of genocide and sexual violence. Her New York Times best-selling memoir, The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State, is a harrowing account of the genocide against the Yazidi people of Iraq and Nadia's imprisonment by the so-called Islamic State. In 2016, Nadia became the first United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for the dignity of survivors of human trafficking. That year, she was also awarded the Council of Europe Václav Havel Award for Human Rights, and along with Lamia Aji-Bajar, the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. In 2018, she won the Nobel Peace Prize with Dr. Denis Mukwege for, quote, their effort to end the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war and armed conflict. Nadia is also the founder and president of Nadia's Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to rebuilding communities in crisis and advocating for survivors of sexual violence. There's a book, a collection of stories called The Book of Gutsy Women, Favorite Stories of Courage and Resilience. It is a collection by Hillary Rodham Clinton. That book includes at least 2 recipients of the Spendlove Prize. But here's what Hillary Rodham Clinton writes about Nadia Murad. Nadia's work is especially close to my heart because I have worked for decades against human trafficking, as First Lady, as a US Senator, as Secretary of State, and now as a private citizen. Her story underscores the importance of human rights, the rule of law, due process, judicial systems, and international organizations in holding people accountable and serving as places of recourse for the Nadias of the world. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome to the Spendlove Prize ceremony, Nadia Murad.
Thank you so much, Nigel. It made me so happy to see my book right there behind you. Thank you, Mr. Canfield, Mrs. Spendlove. Thank you so much for this honor. Growing up in a rural town in Iraq, I never could have imagined award ceremonies like this. But the values of social justice and tolerance that this award recognizes have always been at the center of my life. My family was poor, but my mother worked hard to provide for me and my siblings on her own. I was the first in my family to attend school, and I was only able to get an education because my older brothers and sisters worked on our family's farm. I never forget what they sacrificed for me. I was determined to succeed not only in class, but also in paying the opportunity forward. My family's example encouraged me to help others in any way I could. From a young age, I was passionate about hair and makeup. And I wanted to use these skills to empower the women around me. For women like my mother, who worked tirelessly to raise 11 children and contribute to the community, hair and makeup was not simply about beauty. It was an excuse to take a break and connect with other women. It bolstered confidence. It was a tool of self-expression and rebellion against society's expectations. It was also a luxury. The salon nearest to my village was in a city hours away on unpaved roads. So I dreamed of opening my own salon that would be accessible to women in my community. A decade later, my plans have changed, but my goals remain the same. I still want to empower Yazidi women. And I am still working to make important services accessible across my homeland, Sinjar. This is why I founded Nadia's initiative after the Yazidi genocide. Over the course of 2 weeks in 2014, my village, Kojo, and many others in the region of Sinjar, Iraq, came under attack by the so-called Islamic State. ISIS militants undertook and strategized campaign to ethnically cleanse Yazidis from existence because of our faith. Approximately 400,000 Yazidis fled on foot to neighboring Kurdistan region. In the panic to escape, the elderly and disabled were unable to make the difficult journey. Tens of thousands took refuge on the top of Mount Sinjar. There they faced thirst, starvation, and blistering temperatures that took so many lives. The rest of us, unable to flee, were killed or taken captive. More than 6,000 women and children were taken captive by ISIS. And over 2,800 are still missing today, including my nephew, my niece, and my sister-in-law. ISIS used sexual violence as a weapon of war against captives. After years of telling my story and being disappointed by the lack of action to help my community survive, I founded Nadia's initiative to lead by example. The majority of Yazidis are still internally displaced within Iraq, but camps only serve immediate needs. It would have been easier for my organization to provide services in camps, but I knew this would not facilitate holistic healing or restoration for my community. A few months back, my sister visited our family in one of the camps. Afterwards, she called to tell me, Nadia, no one in the camps talks about the future. In camps, there is only the trauma of genocide and the hopelessness of displacement. They don't dare to think beyond the next meal, because even that is not guaranteed. Without the resources to rebuild Sinjar, Yazidis do not believe they have a future. without local governance and security to stabilize their homeland, it feels pointless to make plans for the future. Yazidi children like my niece don't get to dream the way I dreamed about my salon. They have only known life in displacement. For me, the work to protect human rights is about both current living conditions and a safer future. I want my community to be able to live with dignity today, and once again believe in the possibilities of tomorrow. This requires an approach that is sustainable and empowering. There is no one blanket solution to the human rights issues that plague the world. Even in my work in Iraq, sexual violence survivors have complex and varying needs. That is why it is so critical that local communities, and especially survivors, be empowered with the tools and resources to lead change. I like to say that humanitarianism is the work of listening and learning from those you are serving. And I think this applies to all efforts of social justice, diplomacy, and tolerance. To me, no one embodies these values better than my cousin, who faced her abuser in a court of law to ensure justice was delivered. My sisters-in-law, who preserve every day in displacement camps. And my nieces and nephews who maintain enough hope for all of us. I dedicate this award to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadia, for your moving remarks. Listening and learning from those you are serving as a definition for humanitarianism. Certainly that is one that remains with me, and one that I hope that signals well how we should rethink and understand humanitarianism. You've given us many ideas to think about with your story, and also its relationship to the importance of human rights and the continued need to be vigilant for the Yazidi community and those who face the dangers that you have described in your talk. Thank you for your remarks. I want to now bring back Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Greg Campfield for the presentation of the Spendlove Prize.
Thank you, Nigel. And like Nigel, I wrote down listening and learning from those you serve. Incredibly powerful thought. And I thank you very much for your presentation, but even more for the work that you do enacting that principle. On behalf of the University of California, Merced, it's my honor formally to present you with the 2021 Alice and Clifford Spendlove Prize in Social Justice, Diplomacy, and Tolerance. Usually, this is where I would ask Sherry to present you with the award, but since we are virtual, we'll be sending it to you in the coming days. Again, thank you so much, Nadia. I will turn the program back over to Nigel now for some question and answer.
Thank you, Greg. And thank you again, Nadia. We are grateful for your remarks, for your insights, for the book you have written, for your stories that you have told. We would like to now engage in some questions. If you could further elucidate on some of the ideas that you presented in your talk, but also that come out of your book. And to help me in asking these questions, I have undergraduates from the University of California, Merced, who were very much taken with your story, watching your speech your Nobel Prize speech, reading your book, and seeing your speeches before the United Nations. And they are going to be part of the panel, and we will ask these questions. To begin, it's become clear to me that in your speeches and in your writing, you place a great emphasis on family, faith, and home, as you have done in your remarks today, as you have received the Spendlove Prize. And in your book, The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State, which I have read many times and use in my teaching, you have written the inscription that it is written for every Yadizi as the dedication. In that book, you write of Kojo's beauty, your family's beauty, and point out that, quote, being forced to leave your home out of fear is one of the worst injustices a human being can face. Being forced to leave your home out of fear is one of the worst injustices a human being can face. I would very much like to kindly ask you to tell us about Kojo, your home, and the importance of faith and family for you, Nadia.
Thank you so much. You know what I wrote about Kojo in the book, it's basically it's the example of all other villages in Sinjar. It's the villages in the region in North and South Sinjar. They all have the same like things in common, and small villages, people are very close to each other. I'm grateful that I was able to spend 21 years of my life there in Kojo, to be born and raised there, and to be being raised by like a single mother was a little bit different than like being like raised by your parents, was difficult for my mom, but life was so simple, but it was so difficult. And despite the lack of job opportunities, no one in that small village was like, everyone had a job, everyone had to do something every day, which like, if I tell you about it was just about agriculture, taking care of like animals to make a living, and there was like nothing near us, but still you woke up every morning in that village and hear people like doing something. Everyone was doing something. For 11 years, I would go every morning to school, and the school was like, my home was at the end of the village, and the school was like, when you enter the village, it's just far, like 13 minutes by walking. So classes in Iraq, they start at 8, so you have to be there at like 7:45. So I will walk early morning every day all the way to the school, and you don't hear that sounds of like infrastructure or like building or things like that. So it was just the sounds of that I heard comes from every house, which the sounds of the like hands of every mother from every house that making bread, because bread we make by hand. So that sound was coming from each house, that making bread, preparing for the meal and for their family. So life was simple. There we have few like big holidays, which the next one is coming next month. It's basically people came together and they celebrate and they talk to each other. My community, I believe it was different from others. People will help each other. For example, in my family, we had we would grow onions like all over the farm. So we were poor and we could not like pay employees to come and help us like when there was time to sell them. So the young people from all over the village will just join us and help us to like with the work. So people were like so connected to each other. They helped each other, and life was simple, was poor, but unfortunately we were not even like allowed to have that life, that simple life.
Thank you, Nadia. Indeed, as you have noted, that life was interrupted by the violence brought on by the so-called Islamic State. You have done great work to bring attention to what has happened to Yazidi communities. It has also been the subject of a recent documentary film, the film Sabaya. The New York Times last month published an article about the documentary film Sabaya, which focuses on the sexual enslavement of Yazidi women by the Islamic State. Several of the women in the film were surprised to find out that they appeared in the film. They had indicated that they did not want to be filmed. Could you tell us about this film and its significance, and whether or not it can be a resource for raising awareness on sexual violence against women? Have you seen the film? Can you tell us about it?
Yes, of course, I have seen it. I received so many messages from like my community. They were like not happy about it, and they were like not aware, especially learning that like I was very concerned to hear that the reports about how survivors were treated, and because consent is very serious issue. And I believe survivors when they said that they were not informed about how this footage would be used. You know, these women and girls were being rescued from years of sexual enslavement. They are extremely traumatized, and there is a power dynamic in play with their rescuers. And the filmmakers, you know, free and informed consent really was not possible. It is disturbing to see that after years of abuse in captivity, there was no escape from exploitation. The exploitation of survivors is not unique to this specific film. Since the genocide happened 7 years ago, many survivors have shared their experience. They have repeated their stories again and again. Survivors expect that by sharing their experiences, something will change, you know, and they will receive like help, but in most cases, they got nothing in return. These things, it's definitely re-traumatize survivors. And I believe the world does, the world does need to do something. They need to pay attention to the situation of Yazidis, and especially of survivors of sexual violence. But this cannot come at the cost of harming them. That is why my organization worked to develop the Murad Code. So the Murad Code is an international code of conduct of interacting with survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. It was developed with input from survivors and provides concrete guidance on survivors-centric, safe, ethical, and effective documentation practices. So hopefully the Murad Code will be used as guide and help survivors.
Thank you, Nadia, for offering us that resource and your important perspective. Indeed, the Murad Code is an example of listening and learning from those you are serving. Indeed, I'll be using that resource. You certainly point to the issue of accountability. And in your work, you have made important, compelling, and evidence-based moral legal demands to the international community concerning the investigation and prosecution of ISIS perpetrators of heinous crimes. Could you tell us the latest on International Criminal Court investigations in Iraq and the possibility of international trials to prosecute perpetrators of crimes against Yazidi communities? So could you tell us the latest about the international trial possibilities for prosecution of these crimes? And related to that, how do we ensure that justice and international trials have real value for victims and victims' families and communities, much like what you were discussing with the Murad principles? How does the success of a trial, for example, thousands of miles away in The Hague, bring genuine justice home to Kocho? And here I ask this question because victims are often left out of the process that is purportedly for their benefit and redress. Could you talk to us about international trials and the latest with that?
So the international trials have now been deferred over 7 years. And to be honest, there is no end in sight. The UN Security Council is responsible for referring cases to ICC, but the council's members have not done so yet. So years ago, I successfully advocated for the UN to create UNITAD, and UNITAD, which is a team tasked with documenting evidence of ISIS crimes in Iraq and building a case for prosecution. In May of this year, UNITAD presented conclusive findings to the Security Council that confirmed that ISIS had committed genocide against Yazidis. But UNITAD's mandate ends with evidence collection. It is up to states to act on that evidence now. And with all the expectation of, for example, expectation of Germany, who just convicted a 5th ISIS member for genocide crimes against Yazidis, and a few others. No one is trying ISIS members for genocide or sexual violence. So, for example, the United States and Europe are so concerned about terrorism, yet they forget about communities like mine who suffer the gravest consequences from acts of terror. This, I honestly don't understand. It is very important for my community to see the atrocities acknowledged in a court of law. This is why we want to see ISIS members tried for genocide and sexual violence, not only terrorism. National proceedings in Iraq and the Kurdistan region are also very important, but holding perpetrators accountable would help make my community safer. But Yazidis have long been excluded from the state institutions in Iraq. So we cannot trust that Iraqi proceedings will have the best interest of Yazidis at heart. We want to see international justice, not only for ourselves, but to help strengthen universal accountability for atrocity so that they are not repeated.
Thank you, Nadia, for stressing that importance. And I see this as a consistent part of the message that you are delivering before the most important members of the bodies of the United Nations and within the international community. At the University of California, Merced, ideally we would have a ceremony where you are on campus and you would have the opportunity to meet students. Students would have the opportunity to engage with you. And we do hope that you will join us here at the University of California, Merced one day. But until then, we have students here with us on the virtual call, and I'd like to have them join in the panel and asking questions. And now I'd like to introduce Sukfa Bilar, student in the Existentialism and Phenomenology course. Please, Sukfa.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Nadia. Firstly, thank you very much for giving us the honor of your time and your presence here today. I wanted to say that I'm moved by your defense of human rights and the international protections that they can provide. I believe we're up to 529 translations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, including Kurdish. But human rights have also been understood as continued imperialism and advancements of Western doctrine. Could you help us to understand the importance of human rights, particularly for women, children, and minorities? Are they indeed universal and available for the most vulnerable populations? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wish we could have done it in person and could have talked to all of you face to face. I do believe they should be universal, but they are far from equally protected. Women and marginalized communities are systematically deprived of this right. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights did nothing to protect me when I was taken captive. But investment in Sinjar, robust local governance, and security might have prevented the power vacuum that ISIS was able to exploit. We have to address the root causes to make progress. If we do not talk about what made this community and communities, other communities like the Yazidis so vulnerable, and just for ISIS to take one day to commit genocide and sexual violence, took thousands of women captive for slavery. If we wanted to really find the solutions, we must know and address the root causes of all of it.
Thank you, Nadia. Yes, continue, please.
Yeah, it's all, if you now ask me or ask any survivor in Iraq, what the first thing they want is justice. And so many of us, for the first time in the history of Iraq, this amount of women, a huge number of the Yazidi, women from the Yazidi community, they came and speak. They shared their stories in details, and we only, and I can speak on behalf of all of them, we only did this to hope that we will achieve justice. The first thing they asked, they are now displaced after they went through so much in Iraq and in Syria. Now they are still waiting for justice. And I believe the only thing that can help my community and survivors of sexual violence to really heal from what they went through is justice.
Indeed. Thank you, Nadia. Nadia, when I first encountered your book and also heard your Nobel Prize speech, I heard your speech and I read your book alongside the book and speech of Dr. Denis Mukwege. You shared the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize with Dr. Mukwege. Could you please tell us about the significance of the prize and sharing it with Dr. Mukwege for his work in DRC? Are you in touch with him, with Dr. Mukwege?
Yeah, so much respect for Dr. Denis Mukwege's work in DRC. Of course, we are in touch. We work together. We were friends before Nobel, and we met few times before Nobel. We talked about the issue that women in Iraq, in Africa, and all over the world are facing. We talked about the post-conflict regions and how war and trauma that does not end when the war is end. And I was amazed how the first time I saw a man who dedicated his life and his career to help women and women of they have been through a lot, in Congo. And I was like, yes, we need more men like you. And a year later, we shared Nobel. And after, since Nobel, we have become allies. We often join forces with UN resolution 2467 expand commitments to end sexual violence in conflict. We have founded Global Survivors Fund, which we now working on it. It's a huge thing for both of us, and it's not only to help survivors in a specific place, but in Africa, in Middle East, in other places. We hope that through the Global Survivors Fund, we will be able to reach as many survivors as we can to make sure that they get the support, the help after their experiences. So, it is important it's so important for men standing up for women's rights and speaking out against sexual violence. And I think this is one of the ways that we can, decrease the use of sexual violence when more men are joined us. And that could be not only sexual violence in conflict, but only also domestic violence and other related issues. So with support of men, we can do a lot. We can end this abuse, sexual violence and abuse against so many women.
Point well taken, Nadia. And you and Dr. Mukwege as a force, speaking before international communities, that is quite the force and has made so much change and progress. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Jade Graham, another student from the Existentialism and Phenomenology course now. She would like to meet you and ask her question.
Hi, Nadia. It is such a pleasure to meet you. I just wanted to say, after listening to your Nobel Peace Prize speech, as well as reading Hillary Clinton's article on you, I am nothing short of inspired. My question for you is, besides becoming truly aware of ISIS's actions and advocating for victims of sexual violence, what can someone like a college student and aspiring journalist such as myself do to take actual action towards making a difference? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. And, to an aspiring journalist, I say provide a platform for the people who often go unheard. Marginalized people everywhere are telling their stories, but no one is listening. And even if they listen, short time later, when something else happened, they just forget about it and they move to another issue. But those who tell their stories, they wait a solution. They are hoping that with telling their stories and people will listen and take action. You don't have to tell their stories for them, respect their agency and deliver their messages in an empowering way. And check out the Murad Code for some ethical guidelines, about survivors in Iraq and other places.
Thank you so much.
Nadia, you are offering us a blueprint or a textbook for ways to act responsibility. When I hear you say dignity, when I hear you say respect, and when I hear you say agency, and you connect it to the lives of victims and victims' families, it really hits home and helps me to understand the significance of those terms that we often study in the abstract, but you are giving true meaning to to that language. I'd also like to bring Anuj Vadadkar to the discussion. A student in the Existentialism and Phenomenology course. He also was very much moved by your story and the readings that we did on your work with the United Nations and globally. And please, Anuj.
Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you, Nadia, for taking the time to speak with us. It is truly a wonder to be talking with you and asking you this question. As somebody who studies English, I know that literature holds a great value in terms of preserving cultures. And with that in mind, reading about your life and the struggles of the Yazidi people, I would like to ask, what works of literature in Yazidi culture would you recommend college students or people in general read?
Oh, I wish I could have tell you about this like specific thing, but you know, the Yazidi traditions are passed along orally, you know, so there is, to be honest, there is not much written, but I do encourage you to learn more about the Yazidis and other minority communities like us in Iraq and other places. We are often erased from the history books. College classes teach more about oil dispute and like dictators than the reality of common people. Strive to uncover this like hidden history in your classes. Unfortunately, Yazidis were, you know, we were afraid to like practice our religion or write about it in public, because this is not the first time Yazidi have faced a genocide. This is like before ISIS in 2007, Al-Qaeda, they attacked 2 Yazidi villages and they killed thousands of people. They destroyed houses. And so even now, if you go to Sinjar and if you wanted to like see a holy place in Sinjar, you have to go into the mountain, because Yazidis, they were afraid to build their temples outside their villages, like, you know, churches and other things. So they were afraid. They built all the like holy places and things within the mountain so that could be safe when like, and they practiced like in without like telling. So even with that, ISIS was able to reach 24 of these like those temples and destroy them. So I hope that during your classes you can educate yourself more about communities. You know, in Iraq, in other places, there are communities that are so vulnerable. They are the one who pay the price of war always, women and girls, and they have nothing to do with, you know, with war and political disputes, but they are the first to like face those genocide and violence.
Thank you, Nadia. There's a line in your book in which you're responding or imagining a response to those who are only looking at the Yazidi people with pity. And the line is, "We are human. We had homes. We had a good life. We are not nothing." And I think when reading your book, I continually turn back to that line and the importance of dignity as you make it known within your text and also in your comments today. I want to thank you for taking time to having the Q&A session with us. It's been quite revealing, and it has left us with blueprints, as I have said, and ways to act upon that which we are reading about and learning from you in terms of what has happened to Yazidi communities. So I thank you very much for the Q&A. Thank you for your remarks, and thank you for joining us and accepting the Spendlove Prize. I would like to turn back to Sherry Spendlove at this point to also address you and the prize.
Nadia, the Spendlove Prize and UC Merced are truly honored to have you join our Spendlove Prize family. Your soulful work is important to us all. I am so moved by your comments, by Nigel's, your presentations and questions, and the students, your questions and understanding of and willingness to understand Nadia's work. That this really is going to make we're taping this today, and this is something that people can go to and listen. And I think that we're going to want to make sure that that happens as much as possible. Nadia, your soulful work, as I said, is so important to us all. Your call for international justice, for universal accountability for the atrocities that have been committed, your Nadia's initiative to your Murad Code, all those things to facilitate the dealing with these terrible traumas are so insightful. And to the audience, I hope you will continue to ponder Nadia's remarks, her efforts to confront these twin humanitarian crises of genocide and resultant sex trafficking, and her nonprofit, Nadia's Initiative. Learn more about that, see how you can help with that. And I'd like to add another comment that lest you think human sex trafficking is not happening in your own community, wherever you live, think again, because in communities across the United States, as in the world, women and children are held captive against their will by people who have power over them. If you see something strange, say something to someone who can do something. Many kidnapped children, such as Elizabeth Smart and others, have been rescued by complete strangers. Stay well, mind how you go. Thank you for participating. Have a good rest of the day and see you next time.